Donald Bren, the master planner who built a modern American city. If you enjoy the content, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It truly helps the channel grow and continue to create contents like this. Donald Leroy Bren's story begins far from the polished glass towers and master-planned communities that would one day define his name. It begins in the changing, uncertain America of the 1930s and 1940s, when Southern California was still a patchwork of orange groves, small towns, and open land waiting for someone with patience and vision to shape it. He was born on May 11, 1932, in Los Angeles, California. His father, Milton Bren, was a movie producer in Hollywood, comfortable in the world of studios and sound stages. His mother, Marian Newbert, was a civic-minded woman who later became deeply involved in public service and philanthropy. From his father, Donald was exposed to the energy and glamour of the film industry. From his mother, he absorbed a quieter example, the belief that people in positions of influence should give back to their communities. When Donald was still very young, his parents divorced. The separation meant that he moved between different households and saw life from multiple angles, Hollywood on one side, a more traditional, disciplined upbringing on the other. His mother remarried a successful businessman, and the family eventually settled in Beverly Hills. Growing up in that environment, Donald knew what wealth looked like, but he also saw how quickly fortunes could rise and fall. In the entertainment business, nothing was guaranteed, hits and flops lived side by side. That sense of uncertainty would later fuel his determination to build something more stable, grounded not on trends, but on land. As a boy, Donald was athletic, serious, and competitive. He gravitated toward skiing, a sport that demanded balance, focus, and the willingness to push through discomfort. He also developed an early fascination with the outdoors and with landscapes themselves, how hills, valleys, and coastlines fit together. When he studied geography in school, it was more than just memorizing maps. He was quietly training his eye to see terrain the way a future developer might, as something that could be shaped. After high school, Bren attended the University of Washington in Seattle, where he joined the ski team and studied business administration and economics. The Pacific Northwest gave him a different view of land and development, dense forests, port cities, mountain ranges, and a growing post-war economy. Between classes and training sessions, he absorbed lessons about markets, finance, and the way physical infrastructure underpinned economic growth. He began to understand that buildings and roads were not just structures, they were tools that could either uplift or damage a community. During his college years, he also served in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve. The discipline and structure of the Marines reinforced instincts he already had: show up prepared, do the job right, and don't quit when it's difficult. Those principles would later become cornerstones of his leadership style. When Bren returned to Southern California in the 1950s, the region was on the brink of profound change. Highways were stretching outward, aerospace companies were setting up plants, and families were arriving in waves, searching for sunny suburbs and new lives. Orange County still contained vast stretches of ranchland and agriculture, but the pressure of growth was mounting. It was in this context that Donald Bren found his calling. He began his career modestly, working in construction and then moving into real estate. Unlike some who treated property as a short-term commodity, buy, flip, move on, he became interested in how entire neighborhoods came together. In 1958, still in his 20s, he founded the Bren Company, a home-building business. At first, the scale was small, individual houses, small tracts, limited projects. But even then, his approach stood out. He focused on design, on how homes fit into their surroundings, and on building a reputation for quality rather than quick profits. The early years were not always smooth. There were lean times, difficult financing conditions, and the constant pressure of competition. But Bren pushed through, learning from each project. He studied buyer preferences, market cycles, and the psychological side of real estate, how a particular street layout or view could meaningfully affect value. He also learned to be patient. Land, he saw, did not respond well to panic. It rewarded those who thought decades ahead. As the 1960s began, a unique opportunity emerged that would ultimately define his career. South of Los Angeles, in Orange County, lay the vast Irvine Ranch, approximately 93,000 acres of land once used primarily for agriculture and ranching. The Irvine Company, which controlled the land, had begun slowly transitioning the property toward modern uses, working with planners and architects to imagine new towns, campuses, and commercial centers. Rather than selling off pieces haphazardly, the company was experimenting with something ambitious: master planning. The idea appealed deeply to Bren. Instead of building isolated projects, he saw the possibility of guiding the evolution of an entire region, shaping it in a coordinated way so that homes, offices, parks, schools, and shopping districts worked together. During the late 1960s, his Bren Company entered into partnerships and joint ventures that connected him more closely with Irvine Ranch development. His instincts for long-term thinking aligned with the Irvine Company's gradual, design-oriented approach. By the early 1970s, Bren and a group of investors acquired a substantial stake in the Irvine Company. Over time, his influence within the organization grew. He became vice chairman, then chairman of the board, gradually increasing his ownership until he emerged as the controlling shareholder. In 1996, he completed a deal that made him the sole owner of the Irvine Company, transforming him from an important developer into the private steward of one of the most significant real estate portfolios in the United States. With that responsibility came both power and pressure. The Irvine Ranch, stretching from the foothills down to the Pacific coastline, included what would become the city of Irvine, the communities of Newport Coast and Turtle Ridge, portions of Newport Beach, and large areas of open land. How those lands would be developed, or preserved, would affect the lives of hundreds of thousands of residents for generations. Bren's vision for the Irvine Company rested on a few core ideas. First, communities should be master planned, not left to chance. Every village, park, school site, and retail center needed to be placed with intention. Second, open space mattered. He believed that nature and development were not enemies, they could coexist if growth was guided instead of improvised. Third, real estate should be held for the long term. Rather than selling off assets at the first sign of profit, he preferred to retain ownership, manage properties carefully, and benefit from decades of appreciation. Under his leadership, Irvine evolved from a newly incorporated city in 1971 into a carefully designed, highly regarded community known for its safety, schools, and parks. Residential villages like Woodbridge, Turtle Rock, Northwood, and West Park were laid out with walking paths, green belts, and lakes. Each village had a specific character yet tied into an overall pattern, homes clustered around schools and parks, with shopping centers placed strategically nearby. The Irvine Company also developed significant commercial projects. It built office towers in Newport Center, overlooking the Pacific, and created the Fashion Island Shopping Center, blending outdoor spaces with retail. It added business parks, research campuses, and apartment communities, gradually turning Irvine and its surroundings into a balanced environment where people could live, work, and play without feeling trapped in endless sprawl. From the outside, these developments looked like continuous growth. But Bren's approach was far from reckless. He often slowed or delayed projects when economic conditions were uncertain or when designs did not meet his standards. He was known for being demanding with architects, insisting that buildings and landscapes harmonize rather than clash. If a plan did not feel right, he would send it back, sometimes repeatedly. Patience, to him, was a competitive advantage. Financially, this strategy proved powerful. As Southern California matured and demand for high-quality housing and office space grew, the Irvine Company's holdings appreciated dramatically. Because Bren kept the company private and avoided the short-term pressures of quarterly earnings reports, he could reinvest cash flow into property improvements, long-range infrastructure, and new community designs instead of chasing immediate payouts. At the same time, he devoted increasing attention to environmental conservation. Large portions of the original Irvine Ranch, tens of thousands of acres, were set aside as permanently preserved open space and wilderness. These lands included canyons, ridgelines, and coastal habitats that might have been paved over in a less deliberate development model. Instead, they became parks, trails, and nature preserves. Bren worked with local governments and conservation groups to formalize protections, creating a legacy of green space interwoven with urban growth. His personality, however, largely stayed out of view. Unlike many billionaires who embraced the public spotlight, Donald Bren preferred privacy. He rarely gave interviews, avoided flashy social scenes, and let the Irvine Company's projects speak for themselves. In the media, he was often described as reclusive, but those who worked with him painted a subtler picture, a man intensely focused on detail, driven by high standards, and more comfortable in design meetings or land planning sessions than in front of cameras. Inside the Irvine Company, Bren became known for his relentless attention to quality. Executives and architects recalled moments when he walked a construction site and noticed details most people would overlook: a misaligned window frame, a tree planted slightly off-center, a pathway that bent just a little too sharply. He did not raise his voice, nor did he explode with anger. Instead, he simply pointed out the issue, explained why it mattered, and expected it to be corrected. His calm, focused presence became a kind of quiet force within the organization, shaping its culture around discipline and long-term thinking. His belief in long-term ownership allowed the company to reinvest continuously in every property it held. Apartment communities were renovated, office buildings were upgraded, and retail centers were refreshed with new landscaping, updated designs, and evolving tenant mixes. Rather than letting buildings age into obsolescence, Bren treated each one as a living asset, something that should improve with time. This philosophy set the Irvine Company apart from many real estate firms that built quickly, sold quickly, and moved on. During the 1980s and 1990s, Orange County grew rapidly, and Irvine itself became one of the most meticulously planned cities in the United States. Families moved in for the promise of safety, good schools, and green neighborhoods. Businesses relocated for the skilled workforce, well-designed campuses, and modern infrastructure. Universities like UC Irvine expanded their influence in research and education, creating a cycle of innovation that fed directly into the region's economic growth. Through all of this, Bren remained the steady hand behind the scenes, approving projects, shaping design concepts, and thinking decades ahead. He often said that the Irvine Company's greatest advantage was time. While other developers were forced to track short-term earnings and adjust to the demands of shareholders, his privately owned company could consider what was best for the next generation, not just the next quarter. Bren's philanthropic work grew in step with his business achievements. While he kept his personal life private, he made significant contributions to education, conservation, and research institutions. He supported public schools across Irvine and surrounding communities, funding technology programs and facilities. At the university level, he played a major role in advancing research, endowing chairs in biological sciences, engineering, and computer science. His support helped fuel UC Irvine's rise into a major research institution, attracting scholars, scientists, and innovators from around the world. One of his most enduring contributions was to the environment. Bren supported and facilitated the permanent preservation of more than 50,000 acres of the original Irvine Ranch, transforming the area into one of the largest urban-adjacent natural reserves in the United States. These lands, open to hikers, cyclists, and nature enthusiasts, provided a rare combination: untouched wilderness woven into the landscape of a modern, thriving metropolitan region. Irvine's balance of development and natural protection became a model for other cities seeking sustainability without sacrificing growth. Through philanthropy, Bren extended the same long-term thinking that shaped his real estate ventures. He did not simply donate for public recognition. Instead, he selected causes that built lasting foundations, education that would prepare future generations, research that could shape medicine and technology, and nature preserves that would endure long after his lifetime. Because he unveiled these gifts quietly and without spectacle, many Southern Californians lived near Bren-funded institutions without realizing the connection. This understated approach became part of his identity: impact without applause, progress without showmanship. In business, Bren earned a reputation for fairness but firmness. He was not easily swayed by trends or hasty opportunities. When markets overheated, he slowed development. When recessions hit, he kept building carefully, confident that demand for well-planned communities would return. His measured pace insulated the Irvine Company from volatility. The company survived downturns that devastated competitors because its foundation, long-term landholding, patient development, and disciplined management, was more resilient than boom and bust strategies. By the early 2000s, Bren's influence had extended beyond Orange County. The Irvine Company expanded its office holdings into Silicon Valley, acquiring major office campuses and towers in cities like San Jose and Sunnyvale. These properties placed him at the center of another economic engine, the rising force of the tech industry. As companies like Apple, Google, and Adobe grew, they needed high-quality commercial space, and the Irvine Company became a major landlord for businesses shaping the digital age. In this new environment, Bren applied the same principles he used in Southern California. He upgraded buildings with modern amenities, sustainable design elements, and improved landscapes. He invested in energy-efficient systems, transportation solutions, and workplace environments that supported the creative needs of technology firms. Even as the world of commerce shifted from brick and mortar to cloud computing, his properties remained relevant because he designed them for flexibility and longevity. His growing portfolio solidified his position as one of the most powerful real estate owners in America. Yet despite his immense wealth, Bren avoided the spotlight more than ever. He declined interviews, rarely appeared on television, and released few public statements. People who worked with him described quiet meetings, meticulous planning sessions, and a leadership style rooted in listening as much as speaking. He believed decisions should be made through thoughtful analysis rather than impulse, and that great communities emerged from careful choices rather than dramatic gestures. By the 2010s, the Irvine Company had shaped nearly every aspect of life in Irvine and significant parts of Newport Beach, Tustin, and other surrounding areas. Its communities consistently ranked among the safest and most desirable places to live in America. Irvine's schools rose to national prominence, its parks were carefully maintained, and its blend of open space and urban planning became a hallmark of sustainable design. Meanwhile, the company's commercial properties attracted corporations, retailers, startups, and global brands seeking high-quality environments. Throughout this period, Donald Bren's private life remained largely shielded from the public. He was known to be disciplined, structured, and intensely focused on his work. Those close to him often described him as thoughtful, measured, and deeply committed to stewardship, seeing himself not as a typical developer but as a caretaker of land with historic and environmental significance. He believed that the Irvine Ranch was something unique, something entrusted to him, and that it was his responsibility to ensure it was developed with respect, preserved where appropriate, and passed forward in better condition than he found it. As he aged, Bren gradually stepped back from day-to-day operations, entrusting teams of planners, architects, and executives to continue the Irvine Company's mission. But even in his later years, he reviewed plans, asked questions, and guided major decisions. The Irvine Company he built, quiet, private, meticulous, reflected the personality of its leader, steady, forward-thinking, and attuned to detail. Donald Bren's legacy is not measured in skyscrapers alone, nor in the billions he accumulated over decades. It is measured in landscapes shaped with care, communities built on balance, and open spaces preserved for generations. Unlike developers driven by speed or spectacle, Bren believed in the slow, patient art of city building. He believed that communities should be places of harmony, where schools, parks, homes, and workplaces were connected by thoughtful design. His life story, one of discipline, privacy, and extraordinary long-term vision, presents a rare narrative in modern American business. In an age defined by rapid change, flashy successes, and public personalities, Bren chose a different path. He pursued enduring impact rather than fleeting attention. He invested in the foundations of communities instead of chasing short-term profits. And he treated land not as a canvas for ego, but as a resource that required careful stewardship. Today, driving through Irvine or walking along the preserved ridges of the Irvine Ranch, one can see the imprint of his philosophy: clean lines, balanced spaces, green corridors, and development that feels intentional rather than accidental. Families enjoy parks that took decades to plan. Trails wind through canyons that remain untouched. Schools sit at the heart of neighborhoods designed to support growth, learning, and safety. Office buildings overlook landscaped courtyards, creating environments where work and life coexist gracefully. This is the quiet legacy of Donald Bren, the master planner who rarely spoke publicly, the businessman who avoided the noise of fame, the billionaire who focused more on land than on headlines. His work reshaped not only Orange County but the entire concept of what a master-planned community could be. His developments became models studied by city planners, architects, and developers around the world.